The world buzzed with disbelief when the announcement came. Elon Musk was engaged. The media frenzy was instant, and headlines dominated every corner of the internet. Elon Musk finds love. Meet his mysterious fiancée. From small-town girl to billionaire's bride. Who is Clara Bennett? Cinderella or gold digger? The internet reacts to Elon Musk's engagement. It wasn't just that Elon Musk, the enigmatic billionaire, was off the market. It was who he was engaged to. Clara Bennett, a small-town girl from Austin, Texas, had no ties to the tech world or high society. She was a bookstore employee, known only to her close-knit circle as someone who preferred quiet evenings over grand adventures. Her smile was warm, her hazel eyes curious, and she exuded a sincerity that was impossible to fake. But to outsiders, it was almost incomprehensible. How did someone so far removed from Elon's world capture his heart? Inside Elon's sprawling Los Angeles mansion, where glass walls reflected the sprawling city below, Clara sat curled on a cream-colored sofa. Her legs were tucked beneath her, and a cup of tea rested on the table beside her. She held a framed photo of her and Elon, taken during a quiet trip to Kyoto the year before. "I never imagined my life turning out like this," she said, a soft laugh escaping her lips. She turned to look at Elon, who sat across from her in a modern armchair. His gaze lingered on her, studying her face as though memorizing every detail. "It's not so unbelievable," he replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You make me feel grounded." Clara tilted her head. "Grounded? That's not exactly what I'd expect from you, Mr. SpaceX." Elon chuckled, the sound low and genuine. "That's the point. You're not what anyone expected. That's why I fell for you." She blushed faintly and looked down at the photo again. Her simple joy in moments like this was why Elon loved her. She didn't care about his money or the attention his name drew. Clara was the kind of woman who found happiness in the little things: a good book, a long walk, the laughter of loved ones. But as much as Elon admired her, a familiar doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. Is this real? Or does she just love the idea of me? He knew the world was asking the same question. Ever since the announcement, Clara had become the center of media speculation. Online forums debated her sincerity, with some hailing her as a breath of fresh air and others condemning her as too good to be true. "Elon." Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you okay? You seem distant." He hesitated for a moment, then forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking about the wedding." Her face lit up. "Oh, I've been meaning to ask. What do you think of having something small? Just family and close friends." I'd hate for it to feel like some big production. Her simplicity should have reassured him, but instead, it deepened his uncertainty. "That sounds perfect," he said, his voice calm, though his mind raced. As Clara began talking about venues, Elon drifted further into his thoughts. He wanted to trust her, but years of betrayal had hardened him. In his life, love was a battlefield, and money was often the weapon. His ex-wife, his former business partners, even some of his friends, all of them had left scars, some shallow, others deep. What if Clara is no different? The question hung heavy in the air, unspoken but unavoidable. From the outside, Elon Musk was a man who had everything. But inside, in the quietest corners of his mind, he was haunted by a fear greater than failure or loss, the fear of being loved for the wrong reasons. The fire crackled softly in the background as Clara leaned back, content in the moment. She didn't notice Elon's distant expression or the flicker of doubt in his eyes. And as he watched her, a new thought began to take shape, a thought that would set everything into motion. I have to know if this is real. Later that evening, Elon sat alone in his study, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the fireplace. The house was quiet, save for the faint rustling of leaves outside. Clara was upstairs, probably reading one of the books she had brought with her from Austin, the ones she refused to leave behind despite the endless shelves of rare editions in Elon's library. He leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. The warmth of the drink did little to settle the unease growing inside him. Clara was perfect, Or at least, she seemed to be. She was kind, compassionate, and unpretentious. She laughed at his dry humor, listened intently when he spoke about his work, and had no interest in the extravagant lifestyle his fortune could provide. She wanted a small house, a garden, and a life filled with meaningful moments rather than luxury. And yet, that very simplicity was what made him question her. What if it's just an act? What if, like the others, she's only here for the money? Elon had learned the hard way that wealth was both a blessing and a curse. It had given him the power to change the world, but it had also made him a target. Over the years, he had seen countless people drawn to him, not for who he was, but for what he could offer. They were charming, attentive, even loving, until the facade cracked, revealing greed beneath the surface. He had been used before, by lovers who claimed to adore him, but disappeared the moment they realized they couldn't control him. By friends who stayed close as long as his wallet was open. Even some of his closest allies in business had turned on him, betraying him for their own gain. The memories cut deep, like old wounds that refused to heal. He thought back to Clara's words at dinner earlier that night. "I can't wait for us to start our life together," she had said, her eyes sparkling with hope. "I don't need anything fancy, just you, me, and maybe a little cabin in the woods someday. Wouldn't that be nice?" Her voice had been sincere, her smile unguarded, but instead of easing his doubts, her words only added to them. If she really loved him for who he was, then why couldn't he shake the fear that she was just like everyone else? Elon set the glass down with a quiet clink and rubbed his temples. He hated feeling this way, but the question haunted him. If the money were gone, would she still stay? The fire crackled in the silence, its light flickering across the room. He had tried to suppress these thoughts for weeks, but they refused to be ignored. He loved Clara more deeply than he had ever loved anyone. But love wasn't enough to silence the voice of doubt in his mind. The world saw him as a genius, a visionary, a man unafraid to take risks. But here, in the privacy of his study, he felt more like a frightened boy, unsure of whether the woman he loved truly loved him back. He glanced at the small box sitting on the edge of his desk. Inside was Clara's engagement ring, a modest yet elegant piece she had adored from the moment he slipped it onto her finger. She had never asked for anything more extravagant, even when he offered. That should have been enough proof of her sincerity, and yet it wasn't. Elon stood abruptly, pacing the room as his mind raced. He couldn't live with this doubt, this constant fear of betrayal. He needed to know the truth, but how? How could he test the purity of Clara's love without destroying everything they had built together? As the night stretched on, an idea began to form. It was bold, maybe even cruel, but it was the only way he could be sure. What if I told her I lost everything? What if I told her I was broke? The thought made his chest tighten. Clara had never given him a reason to doubt her, yet here he was, plotting to uncover a hidden motive she might not even have. He paused by the window, staring out at the city lights below. This was a test he didn't want to give, but he couldn't move forward without it. He would tell her he had lost his fortune, his companies, everything. He would strip away the life of excess and see what remained. If she stays, I'll know it's real. If she leaves, then I'll have my answer. The plan solidified in his mind, and with it came a sense of unease. But Elon was nothing if not a risk taker. For a man who had built rockets and challenged the limits of human possibility, trusting someone with his heart was proving to be the greatest gamble of all. The morning sunlight poured through the vast windows of Elon's private office, casting long shadows across the sleek, minimalist furniture. The city buzzed far below, a reminder of the empire he had built. But none of that mattered now. What consumed him wasn't the world outside, but the storm brewing within. Nathan Reeves, Elon's oldest friend and one of the few people he trusted implicitly, sat across the desk. His arms were crossed, and his expression was a mix of concern and disbelief. "You can't be serious," Nathan said, leaning forward. "You're really going to lie to her? Tell her you're broke?" Elon tapped his fingers on the edge of his desk, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance. "I have to, Nate. It's the only way I'll know if she really loves me. Nathan let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You're testing her? Like some kind of twisted science experiment. Do you hear yourself right now? This isn't about her. It's about me, Elon said, his tone calm but resolute. I've been through this before. People pretending to care, only to use me the second they see an opportunity. I need know if Clara's different. Nathan exhaled deeply, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. I get it. I really do. You've been burned. But you're not some guy with a trust fund, Elon. You're Elon Musk, the man who reinvented transportation, energy, space exploration. You think Clara doesn't know who you are? And now you're going to tell her it's all gone, just to see if she sticks around? That's exactly what I'm going to do, Elon said, his voice unwavering. Nathan sat back, crossing his arms again. You ever consider that maybe you're the problem? That your inability to trust anyone is going to ruin the best thing that's ever happened to you? The word stung, but Elon didn't flinch. He had already gone over every possibility in his mind. This wasn't a decision he had made lightly. It was a gamble, yes, but one he believed was necessary. She'll understand, Elon said, more to himself than to Nathan. Will she? Nathan challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, this doesn't end well. Either she stays and feels betrayed when she finds out you lied, or she leaves and proves nothing except that you drove her away. Elon stood abruptly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. He stared out at the horizon, his reflection staring back at him. I have to know, Nate, he said quietly. If I don't, it'll eat at me for the rest of my life. I love her, but love isn't enough without trust. Nathan stood too, stepping closer. You think trust comes from this? From tricking her into proving herself? That's not trust, Elon. That's control. Elon turned to face him, his expression hardened. I appreciate your advice, but my mind's made up. I'm doing this. Nathan shook his head, his disappointment evident. You're playing a dangerous game. Don't say I didn't warn you. Without another word, Nathan grabbed his coat and left, the door clicking shut behind him. That afternoon, Elon sat alone in the grand living room of his mansion. Clara's laughter echoed faintly from the kitchen, where she was chatting with the housekeeper. The sound pulled at his heart, but he pushed the emotion aside. He had rehearsed the conversation in his head a dozen times. When Clara entered the room, carrying a cup of tea, she noticed his serious expression and frowned. Is everything okay? She asked, setting the cup on the coffee table. Elon gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then joined him on the sofa, her brow furrowed with concern. There's something I need to tell you, he began, his voice low and steady. Her eyes widened slightly. You're scaring me. What's wrong? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to meet her gaze. Something's happened. The companies, they're collapsing. Tesla, SpaceX, everything. I've lost it all. Clara blinked, the words sinking in slowly. What do you mean, lost it all? Bankrupt, he said bluntly. The stock crashes, the lawsuits, it's over. I'm broke, Clara. Everything's gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara stared at him, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. I don't understand, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. How did this happen? I mean, is there anything we can do? Elon shook his head. There's no we in this. This isn't your problem. I'm giving you an out. You don't have to stay with me. I wouldn't blame you if you left. Clara's eyes searched his face, as if trying to decipher whether he was telling the whole truth. Are you saying you want me to leave? She asked, her voice trembling. No, he said quickly. I'm saying you don't have to stay. I'm not the man you thought I was. I can't give you the life I promised. She leaned back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I don't care about the life you promised, Elon. I care about you. Her words struck him like a blow, but he didn't let his resolve falter. And what if I'm not enough? What if all I have to offer is me? I didn't mean to hurt you, he said softly. But you did. Clara's voice cracked. and Elon could feel her pain through the phone. "You've put me in an impossible position, Elon. I love you, but I don't know if I can do this." Those words, the words he had feared most, hung in the air like a blade poised to fall. "I just need more time," Clara said finally. "Please, give me that." Before he could respond, the line went dead. Elon set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. For all his brilliance, all his success, he felt completely powerless. The woman he loved was slipping away, and he didn't know if he could stop it. But one thing was clear. The test he had set for Clara was now testing him. The mansion was eerily quiet in the days following Clara's departure. Elon roamed its vast halls like a ghost, his thoughts consumed by their last conversation. Her words echoed in his mind. "I love you, but I don't know if I can do this." He spent hours in his study, staring at the phone, willing it to ring. But Clara didn't call. The silence was deafening, and for a man who was used to controlling the uncontrollable, it was unbearable. 3 days after she left, Elon finally received a message. "Can we talk? I'll come by tomorrow." His chest tightened as he read it. Relief mingled with apprehension. She wanted to talk, but what would she say? Would she stay? Or was this her goodbye? The next evening, Clara arrived at the mansion. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a light sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept much, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. Elon greeted her at the door, his usual composure absent. For the first time in years, he felt nervous, truly nervous. "Clara," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Hi," she replied softly, avoiding his gaze. They walked to the living room, where the air was thick with tension. Clara sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Elon sat across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clara broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she began, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "About everything you said. And I realized this isn't just about the money." Elon's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "It's about trust. When you told me you'd lost everything, it wasn't the money that scared me. It was the fact that you didn't trust me enough to believe I'd stay by your side, that you felt the need to give me an out, like I couldn't make that decision for myself." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "Clara, No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Let me finish. I've spent the last few days wondering how we got here. And the truth is, I've always known you had doubts about me. You tried to hide it, but I could see it in the way you'd hesitate sometimes, the way you'd watch me when I talked about the future." Elon opened his mouth to respond, but Clara wasn't done. "I love you, Elon. I've loved you since the day you showed me the stars through that ridiculous telescope of yours and told me that anything was possible if we reached for it. But love isn't enough if you don't trust me. And what you did," her voice faltered for a moment before she steadied herself. "It hurt. It hurt more than I thought it would." Elon felt his chest tighten. "Clara, I was wrong. I know that now. I let my fears control me, and I doubted the one person I should have trusted most. I'm sorry." Clara studied him, her expression softening just a fraction. "Do you know what the hardest part of all this is? I do understand why you did it. I know what you've been through, the people who've used you, betrayed you. But I'm not them, Elon. And I needed you to see that without testing me." Clara didn't respond immediately. Her silence was deafening, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, she stood, grabbing her bag. "I need time to think," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Clara," Elon reached for her, but she stepped back. "I'm not leaving you, Elon," she said firmly, though her voice wavered. "But this is a lot to process. I need to be alone right now." Without another word, she walked out, the door closing softly behind her. Elon sat motionless, the weight of her absence hitting him like a tidal wave. He had expected anger, disappointment, maybe even heartbreak. But the quiet sadness in her eyes had been worse than anything he could have imagined. As the house fell silent again, Elon's resolve began to waver. For the first time, he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Elon sat in his expansive living room, his gaze fixed on the door that Clara had walked through only moments ago. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. He had told himself this was necessary, that the pain of testing Clara was a small price to pay for the clarity he needed. But now, sitting alone in the cavernous mansion, clarity felt like a cruel and distant concept. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in muted shadows. Still, Elon didn't move. His mind replayed the scene over and over, dissecting every flicker of Clara's expression. Her trembling voice, her tear-filled eyes, the way she had said, "I'm not leaving you, but I need time." Had he pushed her too far? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. A moment later, Nathan appeared in the doorway, his face a mix of exasperation and concern. "I saw her leaving," Nathan said, leaning against the doorframe. "What happened?" Elon didn't answer immediately. He stared at the whiskey glass on the table, now empty. "I told her," he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. "About the bankruptcy. About losing everything." Nathan let out a low whistle and stepped further into the room. "And what did she do?" "She said she needed time." Elon's voice cracked slightly, though he quickly cleared his throat. "She didn't leave me outright. But she walked out." Nathan shook his head and dropped into a chair across from Elon. "You're a damn fool, you know that." Elon shot him a sharp look. "I had known, Nate. I couldn't live with the doubt. And now," Nathan countered, "you feel better. Or are you starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, you've sabotaged the one good thing in your life?" Elon didn't respond, his silence an admission of guilt. Nathan leaned forward, his tone softening. "Look, I get it. You've been hurt before. You've built walls so high even you can't see over them. But Clara, she's not those people who burned you. She's different and you know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have proposed to her in the first place." Elon's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the floor. Nathan continued, "Do you even understand what you just put her through? Imagine the person you love, the one you're about to marry, suddenly tells you they're not who you thought they were, that everything you've been building together is gone. And then, on top of that, they basically tell you, 'Hey, feel free to walk away.' How do you think that made her feel?" Elon clenched his fists, the weight of Nathan's words sinking in. But before he could respond, Nathan stood. "You've got a choice to make, Elon," he said, heading for the door. "Either you tell her the truth and hope to God she forgives you, or you keep playing this game and lose her for good." When the door clicked shut, Elon leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. For the first time, the consequences of his actions began to sink in. The next day, the mansion felt emptier than ever. Clara hadn't called, and Elon didn't expect her to. He kept glancing at his phone, hoping for a message, but the screen remained stubbornly blank. By evening, he could no longer endure the silence. He called her. The phone rang twice before Clara answered. Her voice was calm, but distant. "Hello, it's me," Elon said, his heart pounding. I wanted to see if you're okay." There was a pause before she replied. "I'm fine. I just needed some space to think." "Clara, he hesitated, unsure of what to say. He wanted to tell her everything, to explain why he had lied, but the words wouldn't come. "I don't know what to think, Elon," Clara said, cutting through the silence. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the emotion she was trying to suppress. "This whole thing, it blindsided me. I've been sitting here wondering if I missed something, if there were signs I didn't see. And now I don't even know who you are." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Clara, I'm still me. That hasn't changed, hasn't it?" she asked. "You spent our entire relationship building a world of trust, and then, out of nowhere, you tell me it's all gone. Do you know how that feels?" He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "I do see it now. I swear to you, Clara, I see it. And I hate myself for hurting you. I was afraid of losing you, and instead, I pushed you away." Clara sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. This isn't easy for me either. I want to believe you. I want to forgive you. But this thing you did, it broke something between us. And I don't know if it can be fixed. Her words were a knife to his heart. For the first time in years, Elon felt truly helpless. Tell me what I can do, he pleaded. Tell me how to fix this, and I'll do it. Anything. Clara hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I need time, Elon. Time to figure out if I can trust you again. Time to see if we can rebuild what you broke. Elon nodded, though the thought of waiting, of being in limbo, terrified him. I'll give you all the time you need, he said softly. Clara stood, her movements slow and deliberate. I'm not giving up on us, she said, looking him in the eye. But I need space to decide if we can move forward. Elon rose as well, his throat tightening. I'll wait for you, Clara, however long it takes. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him softly on the cheek. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out the door. As the sound of her footsteps faded, Elon sank back onto the sofa, his head in his hands. He had gambled with the most important thing in his life, and now all he could do was wait to see if it was too late to salvage what he had destroyed. The days that followed were some of the darkest Elon could remember. The mansion, usually bustling with activity, assistants shuffling in and out, meetings filling every hour, was now still. He had canceled nearly all of his engagements, ignoring calls from investors and brushing off urgent updates from his teams. For a man used to solving problems with precision and speed, this was a crisis he couldn't fix with innovation or strategy. He wandered the vast halls of his home, each room a reminder of Clara's absence. The living room still smelled faintly of her lavender hand cream. Her favorite mug sat on the kitchen counter, a small chip along the rim where she'd accidentally dropped it months ago. Even Oliver, her scruffy rescue dog, seemed to miss her, sitting by the front door and whining softly as if waiting for her return. Elon spent most of his time in his study, staring out at the Los Angeles skyline, his thoughts spiraling. He replayed every word Clara had said during their last conversation. I love you, but you didn't trust me. It broke something between us. Her words cut deeper than he had expected. For all his accomplishments, he realized he had failed at something so basic, so human, believing in someone who had only ever shown him love. Nathan arrived unannounced one evening, his usual sharp suit replaced with jeans and a casual blazer. He let himself in, as he always did, and found Elon sitting in the dimly lit study, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. Jesus, Elon, Nathan said, crossing the room. You look like hell. Elon glanced at him briefly, then turned his gaze back to the window. Thanks for the pep talk. Nathan dropped into the chair opposite him, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm guessing Clara hasn't called. Elon shook his head. She needs time. That's what she said. So, I'm giving it to her. Nathan studied him for a moment, his expression softening. You're really torn up about this, aren't you? Elon sighed, leaning back in his chair. I thought I was protecting myself, Nate. All my life, I've been surrounded by people who only wanted a piece of me. My money, my power, my name. I thought if I could just prove Clara wasn't like them, I'd finally have peace. And instead, you proved the opposite, Nathan said gently. Elon nodded, his throat tightening. She was everything I wanted. Honest, kind, grounded. But I doubted her anyway. And now, I might have ruined the best thing that's ever happened to me. Nathan let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. You know, for a guy who can land a rocket on a barge in the middle of the ocean, you're really bad at reading people. Clara's not like the others. She never was. But you let your past blind you to that. Elon's jaw tightened. I know that now. Too late, maybe. But I know it. Then stop sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, Nathan said bluntly. You've spent your life solving impossible problems. Fix this. Show her you can be the man she needs. Elon looked at Nathan, the faintest glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. "You think she'll forgive me?" Nathan shrugged. Only one way to find out. Despite Nathan's words, Elon didn't know how to move forward. Days turned into a week, then 2. Clara didn't call, and he resisted the urge to reach out, afraid of pushing her further away. In her absence, he was forced to confront himself. He spent hours reflecting on his past, the people who had betrayed him, and the walls he had built in response. For the first time, he realized how those walls had not only protected him, but also isolated him. He had let fear dictate his actions, and in doing so, he had hurt the one person who had only ever wanted to love him. One evening, as he sat in the study, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, a headline caught his eye. Elon Musk's fiancée missing in action. Did the billionaire's fortune collapse? His stomach sank as he opened the article. It was filled with baseless speculation, painting Clara as a gold digger who had fled at the first sign of trouble. The piece even included a grainy photo of her leaving his mansion, her face pale, her eyes downcast. Elon's chest tightened. He had kept the truth of his test private, but now, Clara was being dragged through the mud because of his actions. The guilt was overwhelming. He couldn't let her bear the weight of this alone. That night, Elon made a decision. He would go to Clara, not to plead or beg, but to tell her the truth. He owed her that much. He didn't expect forgiveness. He wasn't sure he deserved it, but he couldn't let her believe, even for a second, that she had done anything wrong. As he packed an overnight bag, preparing to travel to her hometown, Oliver trotted into the room, his tail wagging. Elon crouched down, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Wish me luck, buddy," he said quietly. Oliver barked once, as if in approval. For the first time in weeks, a sliver of determination replaced Elon's despair. The drive to Clara's hometown in Texas was long and heavy with silence, interrupted only by the faint hum of the car engine. Elon rarely traveled without an assistant or driver, but this time he insisted on going alone. This was personal, and the solitude gave him time to think. He had prepared what he wanted to say to Clara, though the words felt fragile in his mind. No amount of planning could undo the pain he had caused, but he hoped his honesty might begin to repair what was broken. While Elon made his way toward her, the media frenzy about Clara's sudden absence was reaching a fever pitch. Did Elon Musk's fiancée walk away from the billionaire? Engagement on the rocks? Clara Bennett leaves Musk's mansion amid financial woes. Where is Clara Bennett now? Tabloids speculated wildly, fueled by leaked reports of Elon's supposed financial collapse. Twitter buzzed with theories, some absurd and others venomous, painting Clara as a gold digger who fled the moment things got tough. Clara had seen the headlines, of course. How could she not? Her phone had been inundated with messages, some from curious acquaintances, others from complete strangers throwing accusations her way. She stayed holed up in her childhood home, avoiding the outside world. Her parents tried to shield her from the chaos, but Clara couldn't escape the creeping sense of humiliation. "They think I left him for his money," she thought bitterly. Her mother, Linda, sat beside her on the worn living room couch, her hand resting gently on Clara's knee. "Sweetheart, maybe it's time to talk to him," Linda said softly. "If you don't tell him how you feel, those reporters will keep making up their own stories." Clara sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's not about the reporters, Mom. It's about what he did. How do I go back to someone who didn't trust me, who thought I needed to be tested like I was some kind of opportunist?" Linda frowned, her heart aching for her daughter. "Elon's a complicated man, Clara. He's been through a lot. Maybe he didn't know how else to protect himself. That doesn't make it right," Clara said, her voice trembling. "I gave him everything, Mom. My love, my trust, and he doubted me." Linda hesitated before speaking. "Do you still love him?" The question hung in the air like a cloud. Clara closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I do," she whispered. "But love isn't enough if he doesn't believe in me." Back in Los Angeles, Elon's closest friend Nathan had tried to contain the media firestorm. He issued a vague statement on Elon's behalf, denying the bankruptcy rumors, but it did little to quell the speculation. Nathan watched the headlines spiral out of control, shaking his head in frustration. "You brought this on yourself, Elon," he muttered under his breath. He debated calling Elon, but decided against it. Whatever his friend was doing, he needed to figure this out on his own. By the time Elon reached Clara's small hometown, the sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He parked his car outside her parents' modest house, the kind of home that exuded warmth and simplicity. For a moment, he sat there, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, and for the first time in years, he felt truly vulnerable. He stepped out of the car and walked to the front door, his heart pounding. Before he could knock, the door opened, and Linda stood there, her expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Elon," she said, folding her arms. "What are you doing here?" "I need to see Clara," he said, his voice steady but soft. "Please." Linda studied him for a moment, then sighed. "She's in the backyard. But Elon, she's been hurt. Don't make it worse." "I won't," he promised. Linda stepped aside, and Elon walked through the house, his steps slow and deliberate. When he reached the backyard, he saw Clara sitting on an old wooden bench beneath a tree, her back to him. For a moment, he simply watched her, unsure of how to begin. Then, summoning his courage, he spoke. "Clara." She turned, startled by the sound of his voice. Her expression shifted from surprise to guarded as she stood, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone clipped. Elon took a step closer, but stopped when he saw her stiffen. "I came to tell you the truth. About everything." Clara raised an eyebrow, her gaze sharp. "The truth? You mean about your bankruptcy?" He nodded. "It was a lie. I told you I'd lost everything because I was scared. Scared that if I didn't, you might not stay. I thought, if you knew I had nothing, I'd see the truth about how you felt." Her eyes flashed with anger. "So you lied to me? Do you have any idea how that made me feel, Elon? I trusted you. I believed in you. And you turned it into some kind of test." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I was wrong. I let my fears control me, and I hurt you because of it. I came here to tell you I'm sorry, Clara. Truly sorry. You didn't deserve any of this." Clara looked away, her jaw tight. "You're right. I didn't. And now the whole world thinks I left you for your money. Do you know how humiliating that is?" "I'll fix it," Elon said quickly. "I'll tell the truth, publicly. I'll clear your name, no matter what it takes." Clara's expression softened slightly, but the pain in her eyes remained. "And then what? You think a public apology is going to erase what you did?" "No," Elon admitted. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know that this," he gestured between them, his voice breaking, "this is the biggest mistake I've ever made. And if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can do better." Clara's breath hitched, and she turned away, her shoulders trembling. Elon took a cautious step closer, but he didn't touch her. He waited, giving her the space she needed. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time, Elon, to figure out if I can trust you again. If I can trust us." Elon nodded, his chest tightening. "I'll wait as long as it takes." She didn't look at him as she walked back toward the house, leaving him standing alone beneath the fading light of the evening sky. The drive back to Los Angeles felt longer than before. The air was heavy, suffused with regret. Elon hadn't expected Clara to forgive him right away, but watching her walk away from him again left a hollow ache in his chest. He replayed their conversation over and over in his mind, dissecting each word, each pause. He had been honest, finally, but maybe too late. When he returned to the mansion, its vast, empty halls seemed even colder. Clara's absence felt tangible, a ghost haunting every room. Elon wandered aimlessly, as though expecting her to appear in one of the doorways, but she never did. He hadn't realized how much of his life she had quietly filled. Her laughter, her soft humming in the kitchen, her small notes on the fridge reminding him to take a break or smile today. But now there was nothing. Days passed, and still, no word from Clara. Elon buried himself in work, thinking the chaos of running his empire might drown out the pain. It didn't. Late at night, when the rest of the world was asleep, he would sit alone in his study, staring at his phone, wishing for a message, a sign that she might come back. And then, one evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, the doorbell rang. Elon rushed to answer it, his pulse quickening, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. But when he opened the door, there was no Clara, only a small, carefully sealed envelope sitting on the doorstep. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Written in Clara's neat handwriting on the front was just one word: Elon. He carried the letter to the living room and sank onto the sofa, his heart hammering. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, afraid of what it might say. Finally, he tore the envelope open, unfolded the letter, and began to read. Elon, I've spent the last few weeks trying to understand what happened between us. I've replayed our conversations, our moments together, and I keep asking myself how someone I loved so much could doubt me so completely. I've asked myself if there was something I did, something I said, that made you believe I wasn't sincere. But I realize now that this isn't about me. This was about your fears, your ghosts. You've been hurt before, and I understand that. I can't imagine what it's like to live a life where everyone wants something from you, where you're never sure who's real and who isn't. But love, Elon, real love, can't exist without trust. And the moment you chose to test me, you showed me that you didn't trust me at all. Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the lie. It wasn't even the test itself. It was hearing you tell me that I didn't have to stay, as though you expected me to leave, as though you never believed I was capable of standing by your side when things got hard. I want you to know that I would have stayed. If it had been true, if you'd really lost everything, I would have stayed. Because I didn't fall in love with your money or your name. I fell in love with you. The man who loves rockets and reads science fiction novels late at night. The man who showed me the stars and told me we could reach them together. But that man broke my heart. I don't know if we can fix this, Elon. I don't know if the trust we lost can ever come back. But I needed you to hear the truth, just like I heard yours. Please don't look for me. I need time to heal. Maybe one day we'll find each other again. I hope you find what you're looking for, whatever that is. With love, Clara. Elon sat frozen, the letter trembling in his hands. Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper than he thought possible. He had prepared himself for anger, for accusations, but this quiet, heartfelt pain was far worse. She had loved him, truly, and he had destroyed that love with his own insecurities. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. I would have stayed. Those words echoed in his mind, a cruel reminder of what he had lost. She would have stayed. She had been everything he wanted, loyal, kind, honest, and he had let his fears blind him to that. Elon slumped forward, resting his head in his hands as tears burned in his eyes. He hadn't cried in years, not since he was a boy. He had built his life on strength, on control, on solving problems no one else could solve. But this was a problem he couldn't fix with logic or money. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk felt truly powerless. The letter stayed on the table, a constant reminder of the love he had thrown away. The days dragged into nights, and Elon moved through them like a man haunted, consumed by regret. He thought about Clara constantly, where she was, what she was doing, if she was okay. He pictured her back in Austin, walking through the park with Oliver, finding solace in the simplicity of a life she had always loved. And while the world continued to turn and his companies continued to grow, Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men on the planet, felt the undeniable weight of loneliness. For days after reading Clara's letter, Elon found himself consumed by her words. He read the letter so many times he could recite it in his head, every line etched into his memory like a scar. The quiet sincerity of it, the love that remained despite her pain, haunted him. I would have stayed. That sentence broke him more than he ever thought possible. He had tested her love, only to realize that she had been genuine all along. And now, he had lost her. The mansion felt emptier than ever. Even Oliver, Clara's scruffy little dog, refused to leave the front hallway, his small form curled up by the door, as if waiting for her to return. Elon tried to go about his days, meetings, calls, new product launches, but nothing felt the same. The work that had once fueled him now felt hollow. One evening, as the golden light of sunset poured through the glass walls of his office, Nathan showed up uninvited. He found Elon slouched at his desk, staring blankly at a blueprint for a new project. "This is getting ridiculous," Nathan said, dropping his coat onto a chair. "You've been moping around for weeks. You're supposed to be Elon Musk, for God's sake." Elon didn't look up. "What do you want me to do, Nathan?" "Move on like nothing happened." "I want you to fix it," Nathan shot back, his voice sharper now. "You've spent your life solving the unsolvable. You land rockets on moving platforms. You build electric cars that drive themselves. But you're telling me you can't figure out how to make things right with the woman you love. It's not that simple," Elon muttered. "Of course it's not simple," Nathan snapped. "You screwed up. But sitting here and feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to bring her back." Elon finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "She told me not to look for her, and you're just going to listen to that?" Nathan asked incredulously. "Look, I get that you're trying to respect her space, but have you thought that maybe, just maybe, she's waiting for you to prove you deserve another chance?" Elon sat back in his chair, Nathan's words lingering in the air. "You said she went back to Austin, right?" Nathan pressed. "If you really love her, Elon, you need to go after her. Show her that you're willing to fight for what you broke." Elon didn't respond immediately. He looked out the window. The city sprawled beneath him like a glittering map. For the first time in weeks, something inside him shifted. Nathan was right. He had spent his life overcoming impossible odds. Why should this be any different? He had to try. The next morning, Elon boarded his private jet, bound for Austin. He sat alone in the cabin, staring out the window as clouds drifted by. He didn't know what he would say when he found Clara, but he knew he couldn't leave things like this. He arrived in Austin by midday and drove straight to Clara's childhood home. The neighborhood was quiet and modest, the kind of place where people knew each other by name and waved from their porches. As Elon pulled up to the Bennett house, his stomach twisted with nerves. He wasn't used to feeling this way, uncertain, vulnerable. But for Clara, he was willing to face it. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. After a moment, Clara's mother, Linda, opened it. Her expression shifted from surprise to guarded recognition when she saw who it was. "Elon," she said, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here?" "I need to see Clara," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Please, Linda, I just need to talk to her." Linda studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here after what you did." "I know," Elon admitted, "and I don't expect forgiveness. But I need to see her. I need her to know the truth about how I feel." Linda hesitated, then sighed. "She's not here. She's volunteering at the animal shelter down the road, where she used to work when she was younger." Elon blinked in surprise. The animal shelter. He couldn't help but smile faintly. Clara had always talked about her love for animals, how she used to spend weekends caring for strays and dreaming about opening her own rescue center someday. Even now, in the middle of all this, she was finding comfort in the things that made her happiest. "Thank you," Elon said softly. "I'll go find her." Linda gave him a long look before stepping back inside and shutting the door. The animal shelter was a small, humble building on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was half empty, and the faint sound of barking echoed from behind the building. Elon stepped inside, the scent of fresh hay and cleaning supplies hitting him instantly. A young woman at the front desk looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Clara Bennett," Elon said. "I was told she's here." The woman frowned slightly, clearly recognizing his face. "She's in the back, with the dogs." Elon nodded his thanks and followed the sound of barking down a narrow hallway. When he reached the last room, he froze. Clara was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by puppies, tiny, scrappy things climbing over her legs and nipping at her hands. She was laughing softly, her face lit with a joy that made Elon's chest ache. She looked so at peace here, far away from the chaos he had pulled her into. For a moment, he just watched her, afraid to break the moment. Then, as though sensing his presence, Clara glanced up. The laughter faded from her face. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she slowly stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Elon," she said, her voice wary. "What are you doing here?" He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I came to see you." Clara crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "I told you not to look for me." "I know," he said softly, "but I couldn't stay away." "Clara, I read your letter, every word of it, and you were right. I broke your trust. I let my fears push you away, and it's the biggest mistake I've ever made." Clara's gaze didn't soften. "Why are you here, Elon? To say you're sorry again? What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you," he said, taking a step closer. "I just want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, and I'm here because I'm willing to fight for us, for you. Even if you don't forgive me today, even if it takes a lifetime, I'll prove to you that I'm not the man who doubted you. I'm the man who wants to be worthy of you." Clara's eyes shimmered, her composure wavering. She looked away, swallowing hard. "You hurt me, Elon. You made me question everything." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clara looked at him, her gaze searching his face. "I don't know if it's enough," she whispered. Elon nodded, his throat tight. "Then I'll keep showing you until it is." The room seemed to close in around them, thick with tension. The soft sounds of barking faded to the background as Clara and Elon stood there, facing each other in the quiet space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Clara's arms were still crossed over her chest, but her hands trembled faintly, betraying her emotions. Her gaze moved over Elon, taking in the man who had once held her heart so completely. He looked different now, his usually confident posture weighed down, his face lined with regret. Elon took a cautious step forward, his voice soft and steady. "Clara, I know showing up here might have been the last thing you wanted, but I had to see you." She didn't say anything, her eyes narrowing slightly as though bracing herself for whatever came next. "I needed you to know that I see it now," he continued, his voice almost breaking. "I see everything I did wrong. I let my fears destroy what we had. I let the past control me, and in doing that, I hurt you, the person I love most." Clara blinked, and Elon thought he saw a glimmer of tears in her eyes before she looked away. "You think saying that is enough?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "You think you can just walk in here, tell me you love me, and everything will magically go back to the way it was?" "No," Elon admitted immediately. "I don't expect that. I know I broke something between us, and I may not be able to fix it, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying if you let me." Clara turned her back to him, pressing her hands to her face as she struggled to steady herself. Elon took another cautious step toward her, his voice pleading. "I don't want to lose you, Clara. I know you don't owe me another chance. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I couldn't just let you walk away without trying, without telling you that I believe in us. And I believe in you." Clara turned back around, tears streaking her cheeks. Her voice shook with frustration and pain. "You didn't believe in me before, Elon. You didn't trust me. Do you have any idea how that felt? How humiliating it was to realize that you thought I was just like everyone else, that I was only with you for your money." Elon flinched, her words slicing through him. "I know how it must have felt," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "And I hate myself for it. You didn't deserve any of this. I made the mistake of testing you when I should have trusted you, when you had already given me every reason to." Clara shook her head, taking a step back. "And now what? You say all this, and I'm just supposed to forget it ever happened? I don't know if I can trust you again, Elon." "I know," he said softly. I don't expect you to forget, and I don't expect you to trust me again overnight. But I want to prove to you that I can be better, that I will be better. Not for me, not for appearances, but for you. For us. Clara stared at him, the anger in her expression slowly giving way to uncertainty. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped, her emotions tangled and raw. Elon took another step closer, close enough now to see every tear that glistened in her eyes. I love you, Clara, he said quietly. Not because of what you do or what you want, or because you don't care about the money. I love you because you remind me that I can be more than the man the world thinks I am. I love you because you've always seen me, just me, even when I was too afraid to see you for who you are. Clara swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to speak. And what happens when you're afraid again, Elon? When the doubts come back? How do I know you won't hurt me again? Elon hesitated, then spoke with absolute honesty. You don't. I can't promise that I'll never make mistakes. I can't promise that I'll never be afraid again. But what I can promise is that I'll never let my fears control me the way they did before. I'll never stop trying to be the man you deserve. The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach her. Clara wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, turning away for a moment to collect herself. Elon stayed where he was, his heart pounding, waiting. He wasn't going to push her. Whatever happened next would be her choice. Finally, Clara turned back to him, her voice soft but steady. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Elon, but I don't think I can walk away from you, either. Elon's breath caught in his chest. Clara, I still love you, she admitted, her voice trembling. Even after everything. But love alone isn't enough. If we're going to move forward, you have to earn my trust again. And I don't mean through words or promises. I need to see it. I need you to prove that you're willing to fight for this. I will, Elon said immediately, his voice firm. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I just need a chance. Clara studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded. Then we'll start there. A chance. Nothing more. Relief flooded through Elon, his shoulders, sagging as though a weight had been lifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. And for now, that was enough. Thank you, he whispered. Clara gave him a small, hesitant smile. Don't thank me yet. The two of them stood there in the shelter, the sound of barking dogs filling the silence. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. It wasn't a perfect reunion, and it wasn't a fairy tale ending. But for the first time in weeks, both of them felt like there was a path forward, a fragile, uncertain path, but a path nonetheless. And as Elon looked at Clara, the woman who'd shown him what love truly meant, he made a silent vow. I won't fail her again. The drive back to Clara's family home was quiet. Elon offered to take her back, and to his relief, she agreed. The sun had set completely by the time they pulled up to the modest house, its warm glow spilling from the windows into the cool Texas night. Elon parked the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the faint chirping of crickets outside. Clara stared out the window, her face thoughtful, while Elon studied her in the dim light. I meant what I said back there. Elon broke the silence softly. I'll spend as long as it takes proving to you that I'm worthy of your trust again. Clara didn't look at him right away. She took a deep breath, then turned, her eyes steady. I believe you mean that, but I need you to understand something too, Elon. Anything, he said, leaning slightly closer. Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her sweater. There's something I never told you. Something I hoped you'd figure out on your own. Elon frowned. What is it? She looked away, as if summoning courage, then met his gaze. I knew. His brow furrowed. Knew what? I knew you were lying. About the bankruptcy. About losing everything. She said quietly. Maybe not right away, but I felt it. When you said those words to me, when you looked me in the eyes and said it was over, I could tell something was wrong. Elon's heart stopped, his breath catching in his chest. You knew. Clara nodded. It's not that I didn't believe you at first. I mean, you're Elon Musk. You're a man who deals with crises that the rest of us can't even imagine. But something about it didn't sit right. Call it instinct. Call it love. I just knew. Elon stared at her, stunned. He felt the weight of her revelation settle over him like a heavy blanket. Then why? Why didn't you say anything? Clara smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. I wanted to know what you were really trying to prove. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't about me. It was about you. Elon swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. You let me go through with it. Clara's voice remained calm, but firm. I needed to see what mattered more to you, your fear or your love for me. And you chose your fear. That's what broke my heart the most. Elon slumped back in his seat, the truth of her words cutting through him. He had spent so much time doubting her, so consumed by his own insecurities, that he hadn't seen what was right in front of him. She had known all along. I thought I was protecting myself, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I tested you, I'd get the answer I needed. But I didn't realize I was destroying the very thing I was trying to protect. Clara looked at him, her eyes softening slightly. You don't know what it's like to love someone and have them doubt you, to have them think you're not strong enough to stay when things get hard. You made me question myself, Elon. You made me wonder if the love I was giving was ever going to be enough for you. Elon turned to her fully, his face raw with emotion. It was enough. It is enough. I was too blind to see it, but I see it now. Clara, you're stronger than anyone I know. You don't need my money or my name. I know that now. You just wanted me, and I was a fool for ever doubting that. Clara sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly, as though the weight of the conversation was wearing her down. You're right about one thing. You were a fool, she said softly. Elon let out a small, humorless laugh. The biggest fool alive. For the first time that night, Clara cracked a small smile, a ghost of the warmth he'd missed so much. At least you know it. I do, he said quickly, his voice full of earnestness. And I'll never forget it. You knew the truth before I did, Clara. And I didn't trust you enough to see that. That's on me. But I want to do better. Be better. You deserve that. Clara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slightly, as though making some quiet decision. I don't know what happens next, Elon. I'm still hurt, but I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you telling me the truth. I'll give you as much time as you need, Elon said softly. I won't push you. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not giving up on us. Clara held his gaze, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a fragile, unspoken understanding. I guess we'll see then, she said quietly. Elon nodded. We will. Clara climbed out of the car, pausing to look back at him one last time. Good night, Elon. Good night, Clara, he replied, his voice soft. As she walked up the path to the house, Elon watched her until she disappeared inside. For the first time in weeks, the heavy weight on his chest felt just a little lighter. She hadn't forgiven him yet, but she hadn't completely closed the door either. And that was enough, for now. Elon started the car and drove off into the night, the quiet hum of the engine his only companion. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Winning back Clara's trust would take time, patience, and humility, things he hadn't always been good at. But for her, he would learn, because for the first time in his life, Elon Musk realized that love wasn't about control or certainty. It was about trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to fight for what truly mattered. And he would fight for Clara, no matter how long it took. Weeks passed. The days turned colder as autumn settled in, and the trees lining Clara's small Texas town burned with shades of amber and crimson. For Elon, the passage of time felt slower than it ever had. Each day without Clara felt like a test of patience and resolve, but he honored her request. He gave her space, no matter how much it hurt. Back in Los Angeles, Elon threw himself into his work during the day, his schedule filled with meetings, launches, and appearances. but the nights belonged to her. He would sit alone in his study, thinking of Clara, reading her letter again, and replaying their last conversation in his mind. He didn't contact her, not directly. Instead, he poured his energy into small gestures, finding ways to show her that he had listened, that he understood, and that he was willing to change. One morning, Clara stepped out onto the front porch of her childhood home to find a package waiting for her. It was wrapped simply, with no excessive flourishes, and her name was scrawled on the front in Elon's unmistakable handwriting. With a mix of curiosity and caution, she brought the box inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and carefully opened it. Inside, she found an envelope resting atop a familiar, battered book, The Little Prince. Clara smiled faintly, tracing her fingers over the book's worn cover. It was the first book Elon had given her, back when they were just starting to fall in love. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope and unfolded the note inside. Clara, I'm still giving you time, as I promised. I don't want to push you, but I also want you to know that I think of you every day, and I'm trying to be better, not just for you, but for myself. You once told me that love means being willing to stand by someone even when things aren't perfect. I failed at that, and I'll never forgive myself for the way I hurt you. This book was the first thing we shared, one of the many small, beautiful things that reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place. I hope you still see its message the way you taught me to, that the most important things in life can't be seen, they must be felt. I don't expect you to forgive me yet. I just want you to know I'm still here, ready to earn back your trust, no matter how long it takes. Yours, Elon. Clara set the letter down and stared at the book in her hands, tears threatening to spill. She remembered a night they had first read it together, curled up on the sofa of his massive home, completely at peace. What's your favorite part? Elon had asked. Clara had smiled. The part where the fox teaches the prince that what matters most is invisible, that love comes from time and care, not appearances. She remembered how thoughtful he'd looked, as if hearing those words had struck something deep inside him. I guess that's true, he'd said softly. Clara's heart ached at the memory. For all of Elon's brilliance, all his achievements, he was still learning what it meant to truly love and be loved. And despite everything, she knew she still loved him. A week later, Elon was in his study when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Clara. Can we talk? I'm ready. His heart leapt, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. Elon arrived at Clara's family home the next afternoon, his palms sweating as he stepped out of the car. He'd given speeches to thousands, stood before boards of investors, and launched rockets into space, but nothing compared to this moment. When Clara opened the door, her expression was calm but unreadable. She stepped aside to let him in, leading him into the cozy living room where a small fire crackled in the fireplace. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Clara spoke first. You've been quiet these past few weeks, she said softly. Why? Elon met her gaze. Because you asked me to give you time, and because I needed to prove, to myself and to you, that I could do what you asked of me. Clara nodded, her eyes searching his face. I got your note, and the book. I meant every word, Elon said. I haven't stopped thinking about what you said, about trust. I understand now that love isn't something you test. It's something you give freely and without conditions. I failed you, and I can't take that back. But I want to do better. I want to be better. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears, but she blinked them away. And what happens the next time you're afraid, Elon? When the doubts come back? They will, he admitted honestly. I can't promise I'll never feel afraid again, but I can promise that I'll face those fears with you, instead of against you. I won't run, and I won't let them control me. You deserve more than that, Clara. She studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. Do you know why I stayed so long after you told me you were broke? Elon shook his head. Because I thought I'd finally get to show you who I really was, she said quietly. Not the woman the world thinks I am, but the woman who loved you, not your money or your success. Elon swallowed hard, his chest tight. I see that now. I see you, Clara. And I'm so sorry it took me this long to realize how much I didn't deserve you. Clara's lip trembled, and for a moment, Elon feared he had pushed her too far. Then, to his astonishment, she stepped closer and took his hand. I'm not saying everything's perfect, she said softly, but I see how hard you're trying. And I still love you, Elon. I want to believe we can rebuild this. But we have to start over, slowly, and with honesty this time. Relief washed over him, and his eyes burned with unshed tears. I'll do whatever it takes, Clara. I promise you that. Clara smiled faintly, squeezing his hand. Then let's try. One step at a time. Elon nodded, unable to find the words to express what he felt in that moment. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that they had a future, one built on trust, love, and the lessons they had both learned. Months later, the world would see them together again, quietly, without fanfare, at a small bookstore in Austin. Clara was laughing at something Elon had said, her hand in his, and for once, no one speculated about motives or appearances. Because the truth was simple. They had found each other again, not in wealth or grand gestures, but in the quiet promise of love that asked for nothing but faith. And as Elon looked at Clara, he knew that this time, he wouldn't let his fears steal that away.